Welcome to the Epcotian Adventure,
a podcast where we'll talk about all things Disney,
including tips and tricks, festivals and favorites, and the very latest in news and reviews.
But we're still old enough to remember when every veggie had a fruit.
This is episode 1, Meet the Hosts.
Or, Who in the Park Are We?
So now, please remain seated, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the podcast as we embark on our Epcotian Adventure. Howdy, folks, and welcome to episode 1 of the Epcotian Adventure.
As the name of the episode implies, who in the park are we? Just want to take a few minutes and just get to know us. So,
Yeah, we're just a couple of ex-cast member siblings and Disney adults. Boom, boom, boom.
We are lifelong Disney fans.
We're 50-somethings that like to spend the weekend.
Speak for yourself.
Well, you're almost there.
I am not 50. I will not claim it yet.
You're almost there.
We are Disney adults.
We'll
Disney just leave
adults,
it at that.
Yes, but we both worked for Disneyland. And Disney California Adventure, and then I also worked for the Magic Kingdom. Epcot is not someplace we've worked, but we have loved all our lives since we went opening year.
Actually, the fact that we didn't work at Epcot may be one of the reasons it's our favorite.
Yeah, the magic is still there.
The magic is very much still there.
Which is an odd thing for a lot of ex-cast members that I talk to.
But we do have some unique perspectives, so let's just dive in. So first up, why do we love Disney? Why are we doing a podcast about Disney?
I know Disney over the last year has been very controversial, but we grew up with Disney. I still am old. Well, I'm old enough to remember when the Magic Kingdom opened and being fascinated by the construction of Bear Country, from an Indian village to the Country Bear Jamboree and Trixie's restrooms.
So we grew up on the central coast of California. Going to Disneyland was literally a family pastime. We were just a few hours up the road, and about 4 hours up the road, depending on who was driving.
Well, and that's very true. There would be times when our older brother would wake us up and say, "Hey, let's go to Disneyland." 5 a.m. on a Saturday, we're on the way down to Disneyland for the day, and we're back that night. That was just the norm for our family. And anybody growing up in California, as the song says, nobody walks in L.A. Well,
it's true.
We were very, very prone to last minute going, "Hey, let's go do this."
No, I don't want to sound like we grew up as these rich kids or that we're rich now. We are definitely not.
No.
That is not the point of this.
Now, when you hear us talk about all these trips to Epcot and Disneyland, even as kids, we were lucky that our family had a family business that afforded us that. However, nowadays, we're just working slobs like everybody else. We're just both single and don't have kids, don't have a large house, don't have fancy cars.
We do have a dog who's spoiled rotten, but that's about it.
You may hear a whine in the back every once in a while, and I apologize for that. But
she's very cute, she's
cute.
Worth it.
Anyway, we share expenses, so that's how we're able to do these types of trips. And that's part of the tips and tricks that we will talk about, is how do you do this on a budget?
Absolutely.
Versus how do you do it if you've got a trust fund, which we're probably going to stay away from that. This will really be more about how the common man goes to Epcot or goes to Disney and can afford to every once in a while. So part of the tips and tricks that we talk about will be that.
Because we are everyman.
Now we live in Missouri. We're in a small town right in the southwest corner of Missouri, and we still drive 15 hours round trip to Texas to get In-N-Out hamburgers.
And we made our Disney World season passes actually pay for themselves last year from Missouri.
Yeah.
So, doing weekend trips, doing trips as adults without kids, we love going to the parks, and we'll do it at the drop of a hat.
We have some niche things that we've done over the years too. When I was a cast member at Disneyland or California Adventure, I would get on a $9 Spirit flight and fly overnight on my 2 days off from LA to Fort Lauderdale, drive up the Turnpike and go to the parks to see Off Kilter at Epcot on my own. So we have individual, on our own travel to Disney.
Do you guys remember Off Kilter? I want to know in the comments. If you remember watching Off Kilter in Canada, because they are our favorites. We actually followed them and saw them in Tulsa, Oklahoma when they did a Celtic fair a couple of times. Just want to know if any of our listeners, if you remember Off Kilter, what's your favorite song?
We're still very sad they're gone. We missed you, Jamie and Randy and
Scotty, Mark. Yeah. We miss y'all. All y'all.
And Miracle Fingers. I know that's been a while ago. But anyway.
Back to Epcot. So, you used to do trips all the time as a cast member. Mm-hmm. When we were both cast members, we did some trips with other cast members for a while. We would go pretty much every year just to go to Food and Wine. That was back when Food and Wine was only a few weeks long.
30 days long, yeah.
And pretty much the only festival.
We actually went to Epcot opening year. We were there September of 83, which was the first trip to Epcot. For us, so the park was not even a year old. We actually caught the soft opening of Horizons when we were there.
So good.
Over the years, we've gone nearly every year at least once, but multiple times. Of course, I worked there in 96, and so I have many...
At Magic Kingdom.
At Magic Kingdom, but I spent many evenings at Epcot.
But these are all things that we're going to go way more in depth in during the podcast. We want to get some perspectives from people who also remember those early years and how it compares to today's Epcot.
Right,
we love today's Epcot. We don't want y'all to think that we are only here to complain about new Epcot, because that is definitely not our jam. We love Epcot.
Yeah, we still go all the time. As a matter of fact, we'll be at the Garden Festival here in just a couple weeks. We tend to try to make at least every other festival for Epcot.
Last year we made every festival. I was very proud of that.
Very proud of ourselves on that. So anyway, over the next every couple of weeks as we do these podcasts, the idea is going to be to just give you our perspective on Disney parks, Disney cruises, which we just got off the Wish actually just for Thanksgiving. We've also been to Disneyland Paris, Tokyo Disneyland. We have had plans to go to Hong Kong and Shanghai, but due to a certain bug who we will not name, it's that's,
we just call it the closure now.
The closure, yes. Yeah, it's like Voldemort. You cannot mention the name of the bug. But those plans got changed. Anyway, as we go along over the next 30 minutes or so, we'll be talking more about ourselves.
So as we go along in the podcasts in the future episodes, we'll talk about all of these things, all aspects of the Disney company, probably not the political things, but the fun things, just to share our love of the parks with everybody.
One thing we will not talk about, well, a few things we will not talk about. We will not talk about sports, religion, politics.
Or Bruno.
Yes, we don't talk about Bruno.
Has that passed? Have people stopped saying that? I don't know.
I don't know.
I still love it. So I want to know. Rod did not know I was going to ask him these questions. Uh-oh. So you're getting this on the fly. I want to know what your first Disney memory is.
My first Disney memory goes back to 1971.
That's before I was born.
I was just, I was a wee lad at the time, but, so sorry, my little, my Northern England Irish came out on me for just a moment.
Is that what that was?
It was very, very nice, yes. The first memories I have, of course, going to the park for Disneyland would have been sitting in a stroller, meeting characters, eating ice cream. But the first big memory I have was the opening of Magic Kingdom in 1971. I remember seeing it on TV, and I'd been to Disneyland at that age. We've all, our family started taking the kids, basically. Our parents started taking the kids when we were very young. But I remember watching the opening ceremonies for Magic Kingdom and watching the lead up to it on The Wonderful World of Disney. And then just a year later, in 72, Country Bear Jamboree opened, and or what lovingly became known as Bear Band to everybody we worked with at Disneyland. And the Main Street Electric Parade also started in 72. And that was something that snapped inside of my head at a very young age that this is what I have to do.
That's really cool.
So,
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. So you're born a few years after. We're about 6 years in age difference. Sue was born right about the America Sings age. What's your first big memory?
My first memory of actually being at the parks was being in line for Pirates of the Caribbean, being so excited to go on this big grown-up ride, and then sobbing because I was terrified and having Dad step into the boat and step right back out of the boat, carrying me through the exit. That's my very first memory of Disneyland. We do have some pictures of us at very, very early ages at the parks. We just pretty much grew up there.
Yeah, we'll try to get those posted on our Instagram and Facebook pages about the same time that this is posted to the. I'm old. Can you tell? When this goes out to the interwebs, we should have some pictures of us posted. Also, some pictures of us working at the parks will be on there over the next few weeks, which are embarrassing as all get out, but you can kind of get an idea of how long.
He was a pirate.
I was a pirate, yes. Actually, we both have pirate stories to tell. We'll be telling a lot of old cast member stories as well, and stupid guest tricks along the way, too.
All with a good-natured attitude. We're not making fun of guests. We are guests now.
Not making fun of guests. That's funny. Yes, we know what have a magical day actually means. We've actually both said it to guests over the years. But
if you don't know, ask your favorite cast member.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started at Pirates in 1987.
Something like that.
And at the same time, Sue was just in high school.
I was in high school.
Eventually started working in foods, actually, in the college program, not too long after that.
In 92, I was in the Disneyland college program.
So I got to operate Pirates. Sue, on the other hand, broke Pirates with a shoe.
Hey. Okay, I did not know that was going to come up. Okay, I might have done that. On my very first day, straight out of orientation, me and my brand new roommate who I had just met, Anne, she and I went to the parks after orientation. I was wearing slip-ons and it slipped off. So between the boat and the dock was my shoe, and they had to actually stop the ride.
They had to evac the ride.
I'm so sorry. If you happen to be there, my apologies.
We're talking Pirates Disneyland, so people getting off and walking up the stairway on the up ramp, on the lift. Cast members and waiters pushing boats to Utility 2 and Utility 3. And
then after I left the ride and then getting stopped by a cast member because I only had one shoe on, and they so helpfully informed me that I needed 2 shoes to walk through the park. So we proceeded to Main Street, where I bought a pair of Mickey shoes and wore them the rest of the day.
So yeah, we have our own sordid histories too that over the next few months, weeks, years, however long the podcast lasts, we'll also be telling on each other.
Okay, so speaking of Pirates. Pirates is now currently my favorite ride. As we've just discussed, I was terrified of it as a kid. As a kid, my favorite attraction was America Sings.
Oh, yeah.
I still have fond memories, and I'm convinced that those old songs are only one line long and bleed into the next song.
Where'd the songs come from, Sam?
Oh, so good. But what was your favorite ride as a kid?
I was a kid, Adventure Through Inner Space.
Oh, man, that was a good one.
And actually, let me rephrase. Actually, until 76, my favorite attraction was Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland.
See, I don't remember that one at all.
Oh,
I was too
little when that closed and found out they're building a roller coaster.
Oh, wildest ride in the wilderness.
Who knows? A couple decades later, I'm pushing buttons and making trains go around on that roller coaster at Thunder Mountain. But yeah, I was a sad Oscar when that happened. But growing up and in my teen years, Adventure Through Inner Space was my favorite. I love the old Omnimover attractions. I was scared to death of the Haunted Mansion and Pirates for years because of the drop-on mansion and the darkness. I'm sorry, the darkness of the mansion and the drop-on Pirates. Which is very odd because then the very first attractions that I learned as a cast member were Pirates and Mansion.
And they're classics to this day.
They are. And yes, the mansion is really haunted. Yeah, we will have an entire episode.
But not as haunted as Space Mountain.
That's
which
true.
you may not have guessed.
We will be having an episode coming up on ghost stories of the Magic Kingdoms.
You don't want to miss that one.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll do that closer to Halloween.
Good idea.
Oh, I like that idea. So our podcast is called The Epcotian Adventure. We both identify as Epcotian. We love Epcot. It's our favorite park.
For the record, we named this podcast back in September of 2022 before we had been on or seen any video from Guardians of the Galaxy, the Cosmic Rewind. We're in the pre-show. The gentleman says... Xandarian says something about, is it Epcotian? What do they call themselves?
It is not Epcotian.
It's Epcotian.
It is Epcotian.
Yes, we named it first. So we are not actually taking our name directly from Guardians pre-show. We actually had named this prior to the pre-show coming
But wow,
out,
did that make us laugh.
It made us laugh very hard. But
So yeah, Epcotian Adventure. So why is Epcot our center focus for this?
For me, Epcot means the future. It always did. When I was a kid in '83 and saw Epcot for the first time, we went to Magic Kingdom day one, and then Epcot was the only other park. And I was actually in high school at the time and took a energy class that went to Epcot and went backstage at a couple of different pavilions and out to the energy plant and talked about the People Mover at Magic Kingdom, things like that. So the first time I came around the corner on the monorail and saw Spaceship Earth, I just melted. That was actually the time that I finally decided, yes, I'm going to be a cast member. I mean, I knew I was going to work for Disney from a very young age, but once seeing Spaceship Earth for the first time, again, it was another one of those things that just clicked in me, and it was like, I'm going to do that. And never did, actually, but I still love Epcot to this day because of that moment.
That was so cool. I still remember that as well, coming around. And it's funny because the promotional poster at the time, whereas The Future Begins October 1st, 1982, and it shows Spaceship Earth, and then it shows track going around Spaceship Earth. And when we actually got to do that, it truly felt magical. It felt like the future. Like you said, we were walking into the future. One of my favorite things from that first trip, we'll talk a lot about that first trip, I'm sure, but one of my favorite things was World of Motion.
Oh,
and
that attraction.
First of all, the fact that you could go outside on a dark ride, which is silly that was such a big deal to me because Alice in Wonderland at Disneyland does that. And it had never occurred to me that was the same thing. But you started off the ride by going outside, and it's Florida, so it rains a lot. So that was just really cool that you were like covered. But anyway, at the end of the ride, you walked through the Cars of the Future and the Aero 2000, and they had this like demo car of it and brochures. I had that brochure for years. I was determined I was going to own an Aero 2000 one day.
So yeah, the year 2000 came and went. No car.
Oh, so sad.
So sad. Anyway, let's look back into the past about us. What locations did you work at Disneyland and California Adventure?
My first thing at Disneyland was the college program, and I worked at Disneyland Park when it was the only park. And my very first thing was Hungry Bear Restaurant. I worked in foods. So I worked Brer Bar, Hungry Bear, and I think once I worked, is it called Harbor Galley?
Harbor Galley, yeah.
Harbor Galley, yeah. I made bread bowls. So I did that very briefly, but that whole summer I was there, and that was the opening of Fantasmic. So from Hungry Bear, I could hear the witches cackle, and I could see the scream of fright, and it was very cool to get to have that right there by where I was working. Foods was not for me. That was not my favorite thing.
I don't know many cast members who've said, I'm going to stay in foods my whole life.
But I got paid a whole quarter more to work in foods than I would have at any of the other locations. So I took it. If you've been on the Disney College program, you know that you can live on rice and ramen. So that extra quarter every hour was worth it. But it's funny because guests will wait in hour-long lines, 90-minute lines, 120. What did we see? For Splash today.
Splash Mountain's last day today. If you're listening to this, we actually recorded this on Splash Mountain's last day at Magic Kingdom. 220-minute wait at one point for Magic Kingdom's last day of Splash.
Just crazy. But people wait in those kinds of lines for a ride.
Mm-hmm.
They will not wait in those kinds of lines for a hamburger. So every single guest was hangry by the time they got to us.
Oh,
and
that's
it
long
was
before
just
mobile order.
It was not my kind of situation. But my only other location that I worked was later in life. I came back after getting my college degree in theater and worked at the Hyperion Theater at Disney's California Adventure. And I got to work on Aladdin, a musical spectacular.
Shout out to Chuck, who played a friend of ours who played the genie and then went on to play one of the Tweedles during the...
and several different roles.
Oh, and several different roles, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that was much more suited to my talents and personality. I enjoyed being backstage.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Fantasmic. That is actually one of the locations that I worked.
Yeah, you worked way more locations. Well, you worked there for 17 years.
Nearly 17 years on and off. But that's not 17 years in a linear motion. As most cast members will know, you work and then you leave and find the real world sucks. So you fall back on Disney. Yeah, I fell in that pattern. I graduated high school, went to the grad night. Just a few weeks later, it seems like I started working at Disneyland at Pirates. And through happenstance, I became one of the youngest leads ever on the West Side at that point in guest control, actually, for Pirates, and then Mansion, and ended up working over the years the Canoes, Country Bear Jamboree, Splash, Thunder, Jungle, Mansion, Tiki, Tree, and I was a lead at Mansion, Bears, Tiki and Tree, Splash GC, Pirates GC.
Now, hang on. Because you just kind of glossed right past that. But let's not just gloss past the fact that you were a Jungle Cruise skipper.
I was a skipper on the world-famous Jungle Cruise. I was Raging River Rod. Yeah, I shot the bull and the hippos and the rapids.
And the backside of water.
And yes, O2H, the backside of water. Yeah,
but you also worked for Magic Kingdom.
I did. In 96, my first stint at Disneyland ended, and I ended up transferring to the Walt Disney World Magic Kingdom, where I worked in East Attractions on the Grand Prix. The one attraction that I did not want to work in the entire world over there. I would have worked any of the three parks at the time.
You mean you don't want to be standing there filling up cars with gasoline in 100-degree weather?
No. I loved working for Magic Kingdom. Don't get me wrong. Every cast member that's listening to this that's worked for the kingdom knows there's a lot of magic still there, especially in the eyes of the kids that you see. But for me, I had gone from working as a lead on Mansion and Bears and Tiki and Tree and all these other, in working high-energy attractions like Splash and Thunder, to work in the Grand Prix, so Disneyland's Autopia, basically, but Magic Kingdom's Grand Prix. And since they transferred my park seniority, I started immediately opening every morning, watching the sunrise over Space Mountain. And at the time, lived down in Poinciana. At the time, Poinciana was on a 2-lane road, not on a major thoroughfare. And so I had about a 30-minute commute each morning into the park, and with no traffic.
Now, while we're on that subject, I'm just going to back up a little bit, because a 30-minute commute is nothing. Because when you were still living in SLO, talk about what you did.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, SLO is San Luis Obispo. That's where we both grew up. We had family businesses there. San Luis Obispo, California. It's about 4 hours north. 3.5 hours.
It's 226 miles from the edge of San Luis Obispo to Harbor Boulevard.
And how do you know that exact mileage?
I know that exact mileage because I got my degree from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo while I worked at Disneyland. Yeah, and I was on the 7-year 4-year plan getting that. So for 7 years, I commuted to Disneyland, 226 miles each way, every weekend, sometimes multiple times during the week, if there were grad nights. And yeah, I put a lot of miles on a lot of cars and know every road between Central California and Southern California.
So that's the kind of fans we are.
And that's the kind of road trip people we are. Like I said, 15 hours round trip for a double-double. Oh, you betcha.
It's happened a couple times.
Oh, yeah. And then I went on to work in merch, actually, at Disneyland Main Street Emporium Complex in 2000 and 2001. And then when California Adventure opened, I worked attractions over at Paradise Pier. Became a lead real quick again at Route 66. So Jumpin' Jellyfish, Golden Zephyr, Mulholland Madness, The Rusty. And then went on to do labor recording and training tool developer and a couple other just random jobs, including the payroll desk for a while up until I left California in 2007. The magic's still there, though. That's the amazing
Absolutely.
part. Even after all these years, you know, I'm looking at 55 and the 55 is now more than just a speed limit for me. And I still love planning the trips to Disney and taking the trips to Disney and then coming back and talking about the trips to Disney.
We got to do something really cool this last year, actually two years ago now. We got to take one of our very good friends, Andy, who has also been a lifelong Disney fan. We used to go to the parks together in high school. He was one of those fans who would record the rides on a tape recorder so we could listen to the audio later. Like, he's that guy, and we love that guy. So we got to take him for his very first trip to Disney World.
Now, this is ironic because I remember signing Andy into the park back when he was just out of high school, still in college. And I remember thinking, Andy's going to grow up to either be an annual pass holder or an Imagineer. And guess what? You'll hear Andy Hammer coming up on an upcoming episode. Ex-Imagineer Andy Hammer also worked for Universal Creative. And
We'll introduce him
We'll
later,
introduce him to you. Yeah,
but it was so cool to get to take someone who is a lifetime fan, like we are, but who had never experienced that side of Disney. He'd been to Tokyo. He'd worked at Tokyo. He'd worked at Shanghai.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd never been to Florida. So it was so cool to get to experience Epcot with him for the first time.
And to me, that's the Disney magic. It's
Yes.
it's not seeing it through our eyes. It's seeing it through the eyes of somebody who is not used to going all the time or has not worked for the company. Taking people for their first time is the magic that I still hold on to for Disney. We'll be taking another friend of ours, Catherine, to Universal for the first time here in just a few weeks, actually, a part of the trip to Epcot that we'll be doing for the Garden Festival. And we'll be talking to her, and you'll hear her perspective on seeing Epcot for the first time.
And she did not grow up in a Disney family. She has none of that nostalgia factor, which you'll hear us talk about for Epcot so often because we do love it. And she has none of that going in. So to see what that perspective is going to be super interesting for us. We hope it's interesting for you.
Yeah. So coming up in March, you'll hear us talking about that current festival and the perspectives of people who have never been. So this is going to be it's going to be a trip for all of us. And go ahead, Sue. You have another question there? You want to?
Yeah. I mean, basically, our love always comes back to Epcot. Like Rod said at the beginning, we are Epcot, or we are Disney adults, and that probably lends itself a little more to the Epcot side than, say, Magic Kingdom. Being season pass holders this last year, we would plan weekend trips, which a lot of people don't even know you can do. You can go and really have a great time at Epcot and not spend a week and not take your whole family and not worry about tracking down 13 people for 7 days.
And not having to spend $10,000.
Exactly.
One of our upcoming episodes will also be tips and tricks on how to spend a weekend at Epcot when you don't live in Florida.
Yep.
We'll give you our perspective on which airlines we've flown, which car rental agencies we've gone with, and some tips and tricks on what we, from an adult perspective, experience.
And we're not travel agents. We're not selling anything. No. We just really enjoy doing it. And Rod just happens to be really great at finding deals. And to get those kinds of tips and tricks are going to be super helpful to anyone out there who is planning a trip this next year or in the coming years. Like, he's just full of great ideas. But what we found.
Well, I'm full of something.
Well,
it depends on who you talk to.
I mean,
Anyway,
You don't want to ask his little sister about that.
so that's who we are. We're just Disney adults who love Epcot, love everything Disney parks, Disney cruise lines, Disney Adventures by Disney someday, hopefully. But we invite you to come along with us on this Epcotian adventure and follow it as long as it stays adventurous, I guess is the best way to put it.
And Epcotian.
But thank you for listening to episode 1. I am Rod.
And I'm Sue.
And we'll see you in line.